Okay, so in this video, we're going to do a quick recap of some of these Enlightenment and revolutionary ideas in other revolutions. So, what we'll do in this video is kind of quickly recap some of the broader ideas that we've been covering in the past few videos. And then we're going to apply them in a few more revolutions that took place in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So, just to recap some of these ideas we've done, uh, we have in the past talked about Enlightenment ideas. So we talked about some of these in time period 4, and we talked about some of these in conjunction with the American Revolution. But just to refresh your memory, some of these Enlightenment ideas we brought up were things like equality, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. But we also talked about things like popular sovereignty, the idea that the people are in charge. And we also talked about the idea of the social contract. And we talked about 3 different types of social contract. We talked about Hobbes and Locke. And we also talked about Rousseau. So these ideas were in the video about the American Revolution. We've also, in the previous video, we talked about the idea of conservatism, which is opposed to a lot of these revolutionary ideas, and they want to focus on maintaining order through monarchy and religion. And this might sound familiar because this is basically what we saw happen in China and in the Dar al Islam at the end of time period 4. They were very conservative. 2 other political ideologies that we mentioned in the last video, liberalism. And liberalism basically wants to expand political participation for rich non-nobles. So we want to let people who aren't nobles but are just as rich, we want to have them participate in government too. They're also very interested in capitalism and free trade. So being able to trade freely without having to pay taxes, that's what they're interested in as well. And then finally, we also brought up the idea of nationalism. Now, nationalism is a way to uh, motivate or organize national groups. And so we talked last time about a nation is a group of people that share a common culture and history, and usually geography. They're all in the same place. Now, the thing about nationalism is that you can use it to get political goals. And you usually do that by competing against other nations. So your nation might fight against another nation, and in doing so, you might get what you want. What we're going to see as we talk about these revolutions that we're going to end this revolutions unit on, we're going to see all of these ideas pop up in these other revolutions we're about to talk about. So, the first one we're going to look at is in Haiti. So, Haiti is a super lucrative sugar colony in the Caribbean, and it is owned by France. Now, the fact that it is a sugar colony should raise some red flags because of its nature as a sugar colony, there are lots of African slaves. At the time of the revolution, which starts in 1792, there are roughly about 500,000 slaves when the revolution gets going. Now, there are, for our purposes, two groups of people in Haiti. When the French Revolution starts, or when they hear about it in Haiti, there are two reactions. So there are different reactions depending on which group you look at. Among the white planters, like the white people, the people who own the plantations, they see the French Revolution as an opportunity for free trade. They see this as an opportunity to kind of get what the Americans just got. So these guys are liberals. And they see this like the American Revolution. They want to have freedom to trade with whomever they want. The other group that we're going to worry about are the slaves. And for them, they see this as independence. So they see it as freedom. And so they're going to use this as a nationalist uprising to gain their freedom. And long story short, the slaves win. They outnumber everyone else by a huge margin. So the slaves win. But they don't declare independence. They just want their freedom. And be part of France. They don't want to fight France. They just want to be free and be free people, part of France. And the revolutionary government in France grants them their freedom. Which is good. The only problem is no one wants to grow sugar willingly. So Haiti's economy goes down because Haiti really only made money when they made sugar. And now that all the slaves are free, none of them want to grow sugar anymore because growing sugar sucks and nobody wants to do that. So Haiti's economy drops. The other problem is that no one wants to trade with Haiti because they're a bunch of slaves who revolted. And everyone around them still uses slaves. And no one wants this news to spread. This situation all changes in 1802. Now Napoleon is in charge, and Napoleon wants to reinstate slavery. Remember how we talked about Napoleon was kind of walking this middle ground between the revolution and the old regime? In this way, he wanted to be part of the old regime. He wants to reinstate slavery. And he wants to do this to fund all his wars with the rest of Europe. So he sends an army to do this. And here we're getting this conservative element being brought back into Haiti. So this is a conservative thing. But the slaves, or not the former slaves, the Haitians defeat Napoleon's army. But Napoleon did manage to arrest the Haitians' leader, his name was Toussaint Louverture. So the French arrested their leader, but they still lost the war. Now, Napoleon had planned to use Haiti as a starting point to recreate the French Empire in North America. But since he lost, Napoleon decided to sell all the French territory in North America to the United States. And in the United States, we call this the Louisiana Purchase. So Napoleon didn't get the money he wanted to fight his wars through Haiti. So he had to get it another way, and so he gets it by selling all of this territory to the United States. All right, so the other set of revolutions we're going to look at are in Latin America. And we're going to look at two different sets of revolutions in Latin America. First, we're going to look at Mexico, and then we'll look at what's going on in South America. Now, in both of these cases, we're going to see liberals, so rich people, or here we would call them the Creoles, are going to use nationalism to get independence. Which, coincidentally, is more or less what guys like Washington and Jefferson did in the United States. Like we would use, if we use the term Creole in the United States, Washington and Jefferson would absolutely be Creoles. They looked and sounded just like the people back in Great Britain, except they were born in the colonies. So we would use this same term to describe somebody like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. And the same story is basically going to play out in Mexico and in South America, although the details will be a little bit different. So the first place that we're going to look at here is in Mexico. So in Mexico, this starts in 1810. So the event that starts this off is known as the Cry of Dolores. And basically it was a speech given by a priest to start the conflict. So the liberals are going to fight against Spanish rule. So this is a fight between liberals using Mexican nationalism to fight a conservative Spanish government. And this fight continues. This war goes on until 1820. And in 1820, something happens back in Spain. The Spanish monarchy is overthrown by liberals in Spain. And that radically changes what's going on in the Western Hemisphere. So it's at this point that the leader of the Spanish military in Mexico, the guy fighting against the rebels, decides to basically surrender, to grant independence to the Mexican Creoles. Now, why does he do this? He does this to keep Mexico at least kind of conservative and cut off from the now liberal Spanish government. So Mexico becomes independent in 1821. And now they're independent, but they're also going to be a monarchy with a lot of Catholic support. So they are independent. They've broken away from Spain, but they are conservative. So I guess in Mexico, everybody came away kind of getting something that they wanted. They became independent. The conservative guy got to keep Mexico kind of conservative. The liberals were happy that they are now independent. And the nationalists are happy because now they get to have their Mexican nation separate from Spain. The last place we'll look at is in Latin America. So basically what's going on in South America. And it's going to kind of follow the same pattern. The liberal Creoles want independence and the conservative Spanish don't want them to. So the Creoles use nationalism to rally the people. They are now separate from the Spanish. They've grown apart. So remember, Spain has now been in control of this area for roughly about 300 years. And over that time, the people in South America and the people in Mexico simply grew apart from the people in Spain. Their language is different. They have a different culture. They have a different uh, dress and cuisine. We've talked about things like the Virgin of Guadalupe being an important South American or Mexican idea. They're just different. So the two guys that we're going to name down here in South America, Simon Bolivar, and he's kind of operating in northern South America, and Jose de San Martin, and he's operating in kind of southern South America. So Bolivar is kind of up in Colombia and Venezuela. De San Martin is kind of in Argentina and Chile. Both of these guys use nationalism to unite the people. And eventually, by the 1820s, most of South America is free from Spanish control. Now, in northern South America, Bolivar wants to create a South American kind of United States. So he wants to kind of put all of the pieces of northern South America together into something that resembles the United States. And he calls this thing Gran Colombia. Colombia. However, Gran Colombia does not work like the United States does. All of the regional differences create nationalisms within Gran Colombia, and it disintegrates in 1831, right after Bolivar dies. He dies in 1830. So we'll stop there, mostly because I've run out of paper. But hopefully at this point you've got an idea of how all of these different political ideas are all kind of in conflict and operating against each other in these revolutions. But for the most part, liberalism seems to be pushing back against conservatism and at least opening the door for more and more people to participate in government. And that's what we'll see as we move through this time period. More and more people are going to be participating in government and traveling and migrating all over the world looking for work. And time period 5 is a period in which more and more people are going to be involved in the story. So we'll continue going through time period 5 in our next set of videos, but until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.